What's going on, traders? Thank you so much for tuning back in, but I'm going to go ahead and break down my trades for you guys and let you guys know exactly how it went. So let's jump right into today's recap. And as you guys can tell from the thumbnail, right, unfortunately it was another red day yet again, right? So as you guys can see, I was up $32 on SQs, but I did lose $110 on TQs. So ultimately I did finish down about $76 on the day, right? And so I'm just glad that I was able to keep my loss under 1% of my daily, position size. And so that's the only win, right, in my opinion that I had today. But I made so many mistakes and I'm going to go ahead and break them down for you so that hopefully you guys can learn from them as well, right? So, but as you guys can see, right, just in terms of my overall orders, I took a ton of trades today. So definitely over traded like crazy. And on the days I overtrade, right, it's no coincidence that I don't end up performing the best. But I started trading at market open at 6:30, as you guys can see, right? And I didn't stop trading until even after market hours, right? So I was trading for a decent time today, but let me go ahead and break down a crucial mistake I made, right? So hopefully you guys can take away something from it as well. But in terms of what I saw going on, I obviously knew that bigger picture wise, right, the Nasdaq has been very overextended and it was due for a pullback, right? So we were rallying ever since January 6th, right, using the EMA, right, or this blue line here as a support. We finally started trading sideways and consolidating, right? And so we did end up pushing back up and for a third time tested this resistance level. Ultimately, we ended up pulling on back, right? And then right around here, we tried finding a support where we previously did, but what ended up happening? Well, we pushed up and then continued to sell off into today, right? And so, a big dilemma I had, even just heading into today, was I wasn't too sure if we were actually going to start to push up, right? Because as you guys can see, the past 20 days, this is how it's looked. And so, right at market open, this thing was trading around, these areas. And so I personally thought that there was a chance we were going to see some form of either support, right, and start to push on up, right, or if we were going to continue to sell off. So that's where I was really uneasy and hesitant. But really heading into today, right, in my opinion, I was more focused on SQs because of the fact that the market was so overbought. And as you guys can see, SQs had a really nice day today, but the fact that I was able to end really red on the day is because of this one big mistake, and it all had to do with my mindset, right? So in my mind, I was thinking, well, as you guys saw right on the bigger picture, this thing could potentially bounce and continue to rally, or this thing could start to sell off on the day, right? And break below this support. So once market opened, I saw this thing tried to fall a bit, but ultimately it broke above the EMA really strongly and was doing a decent job of holding. And so as you guys can see, even from my initial trades, right, what was I so focused on right at market open? SQs, right? As you guys can see, SQs is what I was focused on. The first, half hour to an hour of the market. And so that's really where I went wrong, and it's because of the fact that this thing started to push up, and every time it would pull on back, I would keep thinking it's time for SQs. I'd size up, and then it would end up going south, and I'd have to cut it, right? So, believe it or not, by the time this thing ended up pushing up, I dug myself in such a hole that I was down about $120 on the day on SQs. And so, I obviously was not doing a good job there. And so, once this thing started to finally sell off, I was able to make my money back. But I thought that because we pushed up very nicely at market open, we were going to pull on back and potentially find a support and try to make a new high, right? And so that was my game plan. But what ended up happening is this thing sold off, right? And then you guys can see it tried finding a support. But on the way down here, I was trading SQs, right? So I made my money back. Around this area, I cut my trade there. So I recovered everything I lost because I was getting in pretty aggressively on the way down here, right? And then once this thing started to push up here, I thought there was a potential TQs play, right? As I explained, where this thing could potentially make a higher low. So once I saw this thing start to form a support and push, I got, really heavy into TQs. And once this thing pushed up here, I ended up actually, and pulling on back, I locked it in for about a $30 to $40 profit. So around this point, I was actually up about $60 on the day. So I went from being down 120, wrote this thing down, made it all back, plus a little bit of profit. And then I made this one TQs play right? I was up about 60 to 70, right? This thing started to pull on back. I continuously tried to get into TQs, thinking that this thing was going to continue to go because of this nice push we had at market open. And so why was this such a big mistake? Well, if you guys can see on the bigger picture, right? It wasn't necessarily like the worst idea to try to go with this trade here. But once I saw this thing pull on back and break this support and this support that we saw right at market open, that should have given me a really good indication that, okay, I should probably stop focusing on trying to find the bottom, right, and perfectly time a trade. And I should just go with direction on the day. And so that's the big crucial mistake I made, right? If I were to have just cut my loss there on TQs, and instead of just trying to focus on any single time I saw this thing start to bounce, thinking, okay, this is finally going to be it, and it's finally going to start to push now, right? Instead of doing that, I could have focused on what direction was telling me. Well, this thing broke below the pre-market support, right? And, the support it found right at market open. On top of that, right, this thing would sell off, break above the EMA, and it wouldn't be able to hold for a long period of time, right? This thing would break above and then start to sell off. Break above, it wouldn't hold, sell off. Anytime it broke above, it would struggle to hold and sell off, right? So literally the whole day, rather than go with direction and potentially make money on the inverse ETF of the NASDAQ, right, on SQs, I was just trying to time where this perfect bottom would be, right? That never ended up happening. This thing ended up selling off all the way to lows of 12,090 here, as you guys can see. And what was I doing? I was too focused on trying to get into TQs. Oh, this thing looks like it's finding a support. Let me get into TQs. Then once it would go south, I'd just continue to cut my losses. I was literally doing that all day to where I gave back all the profit I made after being blessed enough to, recover from this big loss and profit on the day, right? I was so greedy trying to find the bottom that I ended up giving back everything plus the $76 loss on the day, right? So definitely a very, very, unproductive and just a terrible trading day for me in general. I was just really missing the bigger picture. And, although it wasn't dumb to try to get in around this area for a TQs play, in my opinion, right? I should have just known that once this thing was breaking the support levels, just switch on over, right? There's no need to overcomplicate it. I was just, too focused on the bigger picture, trying to time exactly when this thing would find a bottom before it ripped, right? I was too focused on that instead of acknowledging that there wasn't going to be enough time in the day left for this thing to recover, right? It wouldn't have to have happened today. And that's just something I wasn't accepting of, and I ended up paying the price for it, right? Rightfully so, right? I deserve this red loss, and there's no one else who put myself in this position other than me. Right, and it did really suck to have this loss because, as you guys can see, our account did take a decent, hit today because of all the swing trades, right? Lots of the tech stocks we are invested in did pull on back along, with the NASDAQ driving it down, which makes sense. And so heading into tomorrow, what am I going to do? Well, we are at a potential more of a support area, right? I'm not saying, we're going to potentially, bounce and, go to the moon. That's not ultimately realistic. Obviously, this thing has tried to push up 3 times. It has gotten rejected. We are at a potential support area where it can, start to push up potentially, right? If we do start to push up, we can try to gap up to around the resistance levels before we continue to sell off again. Or, we can break through this and continue to sell off before, ultimately trying to find some form of support. So we just have to take it day by day and see what ends up happening. But that's why I will be trading tomorrow and posting a recap as usual to keep you guys updated. But in terms of any economic reports that were released, right? You guys can see that, there were existing home sales at 10 a.m. Eastern time, right? Or 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And what was actually released, well, prior was reported at 4.03 million, right? Existing home sales. We were expecting an increase, but we actually got 4.00 million. And I know it sounds like that's actually bad for the market, right? That we're having less home sales, but we should actually see that as a positive thing because of the fact that, if, say this thing came out higher than what was actually expected, the Federal Reserve would have seen that, well, there are lots of home sales being made. That's not necessarily what the Federal Reserve wants, right? What they want is for people to stop spending money in order to try to combat inflation, right? And so if we would have seen an existing home sale that was more than expected, that could have incentivized the Federal Reserve to try to be more aggressive with the next interest rate hikes, right? And that would be bad for the market overall. But because of the fact that it actually came out at lower than expected, right? It's not bad news necessarily, right? It's actually more of a positive thing because the Federal Reserve can see this and justify not being so aggressive in the next interest rate hike. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about today. I want to thank you guys so much again for your time and hope you guys all have been having an amazing day. But that's pretty much everything. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop a comment down below. I am more than happy to break down any stock you guys want for me, right? Just go ahead and recommend it, or any stock indicator. Yeah, and I can go ahead and make a video on that. But thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Take care and have a good rest of your day.